Parenting Porcupines. This is episode 9. My name is Kasie. I'm in the Midlands here in South Carolina, a member of the South Carolina Libertarian Party. Those of you who've known our show have watched the first episodes. If you haven't yet, go binge them. They're worth it. This is the second part of the cancel culture episode that Jessica and I filmed last week, and we're glad to bring with us our friends Alex and Melissa to pick up the conversation on cancel culture. I have a 12-year-old. I'm a homeschool mom of a 12-year-old here in the Midlands and a university lecturer over at the University of South Carolina. Jessica, who are you and who are your children?
I'm Jessica, in case you guys missed that. I'm in the upstate of South Carolina. I have 2 kids. My elder son will be 12 tomorrow, and he just started 6th grade, and I have an 8-year-old who just started 3rd grade.
Nice. Melissa, you're up. Where are you and who are your children?
I am in the Low Country down in Charleston, saying that like Alex says it. With my drawl. I've got 3 kids. My oldest just started 5th grade, and he does virtual online schooling all the time, not just because of the pandemic. And I've got a kindergartner and a 2nd grader that start virtual schooling next week. So
So Charleston finally got their shit together and figured out how to send your kids back to school, huh?
Barely. It still changes on a daily basis, but
look, I assure you, Richland too has not gotten their shit together, and I'm calling them out big time here on YouTube because they have called me 3 days in a row to tell me that Holly was not in school because she doesn't go to your school. Okay, so put that in your registrar and smoke it. All right, Alex, you're up.
I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. I have a 1-year and 1-month-old tiny man who lately has been giving us really sweet hugs and then surprising us by biting us at the end of the hug.
Aww.
So that's real fun.
Have you explained to him the non-aggression principle?
I'm working on it really hard. I think it's going to soak in eventually.
All right. Tonight's episode is on cancel culture. As I mentioned, we talked a little bit about this last week, Jessica and I did, but we mostly focused on voluntary association and the professional ramifications around cancel culture in terms of guys like Tom Brenneman who slip up on a hot mic, musical acts like the Dixie Chicks and Ryan Adams who for one reason or another experience some kind of backlash against their personal behavior and what that might do to your professional experience. We didn't spend a lot of time talking about how do we talk to our kids about this, so we thought that's what we would do this particular episode. So I want to start with Melissa and ask you first if this is a conversation that's come up in your house at all. Have you guys, does the phrase cancel culture happen in your house? Do you guys have any kind of experience with this?
No, my children don't know what that phrase means. They've never heard it. They a lot of ones being mean to me, and I keep trying to get them to understand if you don't like the way your brother is treating you, don't play with him. Walk away. He will learn not to be a jerk. And my 7-year-old, mommy, no one will play with me. No one will play with me. Well, stop bossing them around. They don't want to interact with that kind of person right now. You need to stop your behavior if you want them to come and play with you. So we've had that discussion a lot, but yep.
As they're just learning to interact with one another and put up with each other's bad behavior, right?
I mean, Caldwell being 8, I don't really think this is something that's anything that he's aware of yet. I think Jackson is to an extent. We don't ever identify it as cancel culture, but we talk about it more in the way of, just because you can be an asshole doesn't mean you should be an asshole. So don't be an asshole, right? Like, it's really that easy. And it's the same thing like Melissa was saying. If Caldwell's getting on Jackson's nerves, go somewhere. Like, go to your room, separate. If same is true for Caldwell. If Jackson's getting on his nerves, like, just separate, go your other direction and find something else to do or be a part of, They haven't, I mean, Caldwell doesn't really have a lot of friends, really, like, 'cause he's 8. Like, 8-year-olds don't have a ton of friends. Jackson is starting to get friends, but because he went from 5th grade to 6th grade this year, he's in a new school with a lot of new people because a lot of his friends that were with him last year aren't.
Alex, when you think about cancel culture, if there's a bigger lesson here, right? We talked about it, just because you can be an asshole doesn't mean you should be an asshole. What would you say about this idea that cancel culture is directing how we interact with one another, or whether or not cancel culture is a good thing? We know it's not new. It's been around for a long time, but it's got some teeth behind it now as far as social media is concerned. What would you say as far as that being something we just have to live with it, or should we fight against it?
Well, first of all, I'm learning a lot from y'all, since obviously we're not dealing with this with Perry. It's just something we have to think about with ourselves. But I do think about something similar on a pretty regular basis, and that is the balance between grace and truth. So if you put cancel culture in the truth category, like, this is what you've done, this is why you're no longer allowed to be in front of people or be listened to or be looked up to. If you do all truth and no grace, then that's skewed in the very, very wrong direction. And the way I want to parent Perry, we call that parenting, PERRENTING, in case you want to know that, never mind. There has to be an appropriate balance of grace and truth. When he does something wrong, we are going to have to tell him, you've done this wrong, and mostly there will be discipline that goes along with it, but there also has to be grace, because if there's too much truth, too much discipline that goes along, i.e. what we're talking about with cancel culture, it makes people become very secretive and they hide things and they're ashamed when we all do terrible things. I'm not saying that we all do terrible things that deserve to be canceled, but we're human beings. But on the flip side, if there's too much grace, you guys all know people who are given too much grace, right? Like, they're entitled and they don't show sympathy or empathy for others. You don't want that either. Right. So in thinking about cancel culture, I have been thinking about the way to balance grace and truth in my parenting. And it's something that Sean and I have talked about. And I like that conversation to continue, so that as Perry does get older, it can tie into the cancel culture thing, which I would rather it be gone by then, but I don't think it will be.
Cancel culture runs amok in the public realm. Is there a place for it in our private circles? And I guess what my question about that is, when we think of our group, our sort of tight-knit group in the Libertarian Party, we had some conversation not too long ago around disavowing people who are maybe not true libertarians. There's always this like libertarian litmus test. We're watching new people come to the party because they're interested in a third alternative, something that's not Biden or Trump, but they may not necessarily understand what the party's values are. Is there room? How much grace do we need to have now, right? How is there a requirement for us to have more grace or show more grace now at this particular year in 2020? Jessica, what do you think?
I think that we've gotten to a point that there's this idea that just because somebody doesn't agree with me, I shouldn't associate with them, which is absolutely ridiculous. And we all know, because here's the thing, the four of us, even though we think a lot alike in a lot of ways about a lot of things, there are things that we disagree with one another on. Some of us haven't found those things. Kasie and I have had conversations where she has said things and I've said things, and we're like, you know what, we just don't agree. And that's okay. It's like the 1 out of 20,000 things that we don't agree on, but still. And this idea that just because someone doesn't fit into this little box we drew, that they don't fit just perfectly, that they can't be our friend, or they can't be part of our club, or that they can't be invited to our party, or whatever, like, that is silly to me. That is silly to me, because at the end of the day, unless somebody has done something just completely egregious, if they haven't, if they've hurt somebody or things like that, then obviously those aren't the type of people that we want to be associated with. But when we're talking about people who just don't agree with everything we say, like, that's a really silly reason to say, I don't like you, I don't want you to be anywhere near me or my friends or anything, whatever, But the same is true, like in this situation that Kasie's talking, that you've mentioned with like a political party. Do we really want to push people out? Like I don't know. I think that's just silly. And why would I disassociate from someone who's associated with someone else who might be associated with somebody who did this thing that's terrible? Like at what point does it stop?
Those
Does
6
that
degrees of
make sense?
separation. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm babbling tonight. My brain is mush.
No, you're fine.
It was great. I loved it.
So Melissa, because I think you and Alex, I think have been in the party a little bit longer than Jessica and I. When you think about the how the party is growing and the people that we invite in, and as we welcome new folks in, how much grace do you think is out there? I mean, are we looking for people who are cookie cutter, they look exactly like us, or are we trying to be a big tent party? I mean, are we trying to encourage people from different stripes and walks of life?
Well, the whole thing. The reason I love libertarianism is I can have completely different ideas than all the other libertarians. As long as I don't think I should use the government to enforce those ideas on you, we agree. That's it. That's the only agreement we have to have. There's degrees on size of government, anarchy, whatever. If we can all agree to not use the government to force people to do things, there you go. We can disagree all day long.
Yep.
You may want to send out a memo about that. I think a lot of people in our party don't understand that.
That's the whole appeal of the party.
Yeah.
Is you can disagree. We love to disagree. Libertarians love to argue. It's fun.
Well, I think where the reason where we're starting to see some members of the party wanting to have more of a stable platform, a particular, this is how we plan to solve problems. This is how we plan to do it. This is our prescription for how we plan to do it and how we plan to use the government to make it happen, right? Is because in the tradition of political parties, that's how political parties communicate, is the government is our tool. We're going to use it to make your life better, right? We know that that is a false narrative. But in general, the general public doesn't know that. They think that the government is there to serve them and make their lives better, make their lives easier. And so when they look at our party and they go, how are you going to help me? And we're like, I'm not going to help you. And then they're like, well, then why should I vote for you? You're like, well, because I'm going to let you help yourself, right? I'm going to get out of the way so you can do this for yourself. I think there's a parenting piece to that. And I think, Alex, you're about to bump up against it, because with Perry being a year and a half old, he's just now walking, he's getting into things, he's grabbing things, he doesn't have the strength to lift things, and he's going to hit that phase where like you want to help him climb up in a chair, you want to help him do something, and he's going to go wet noodle on you and lose his shit. And all of us have seen this happen with the toddler, right? So how much of that standing back from your kid and giving your kid opportunity to try it himself and possibly fail is the libertarian concept, right? And also our concept of government. The government should step back and let the people do it themselves. What do you think, Alex?
So I probably, just speaking for Perry, I probably err on the side of giving him too much independence already. And he's just a year and a month old. Don't be pushing my time schedule with my baby. He's not a year and a half. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. So what we do is we let him climb up something when he wants to climb up something. And he has bruises, even though he's a tiny little guy, because if we're constantly picking him up when he falls, then he's never going to learn. And as a millennial who is afraid to make her own doctor's appointments or dentist appointments, because my sweet mom, hi mom, if you're listening, she always wanted to do it for me to make sure that I was advocated for. I feel like that may have hurt me as an adult. So it's something that I think about a lot with Perry, and it is so easy to tie that into the government. If the government is constantly, quote, picking people up, then they're never going to have the skills to learn how to actually live their life. And I say, quote, picking people up, because we know that the government cannot do anything correctly or efficiently. So it's not like it's actually even helping I think that we all deserve the right to be responsible for ourselves. There's a lot of learning that comes with that, and we deserve that opportunity, and the government takes it from anyone that they can.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Jessica, what do you think as far as your boys as they're getting older and the things that you do for them? We know we've watched this failed parenting strategy. Sorry, millennial friends, but there's this failed parenting strategy of helicopter parents, right? Where they did everything. They tried to keep the kid safe. They tried to keep the kid insulated. They tried to make sure the kid's self-esteem was always in good shape. And we know that this is a failed strategy. Jessica, what do you think? Is this an accurate metaphor for government to think about parents swooping in and trying to fix things, but maybe just doing more harm than good?
Yeah, I think it's true. And I'm a millennial too. I'm at the very like oldest end of that spectrum. So I'm like, I barely missed the cutoff to be the cool Gen Xer like Kasie.
We can't all be Gen Xers.
But I guess, but for me, because I grew up in a more of a blue collar family, and my mom left when I was 14. And so I lived with my dad after that. And my dad he was never the dad that was, let me do these things for you. And my dad was a truck driver. So he was gone. Like he worked until late. He didn't get home until 10 o'clock at night. And so, I had to do my own homework. I had to cook my own dinner. I had to take care of my brother. I had to do all these things. And of course, we had family members who helped out with certain things, but so I never really experienced that helicopter type of parenting. And I don't do that either. But I do think that is probably one of the best metaphors for government, Alex, that I have ever heard. And I've never thought about that. But I think that is, you hit the nail on the head. You really did.
But let's make this clear, right? Because parents are doing that because they want to protect their children, because they love their children, and they're doing what they think is the right thing to do. That is not why government does it, right? They're not doing it because they love you. Government does not love you, right? Government wants your power. They want your money. The political parties that have hijacked our government, we are living in an oligarchy, and it is run by the Republicans and the Democrats, who in fact are not the government, but everybody thinks that they are, and they own us, and they're taking all of that from us by pretending like they love us and care about us as if they're parents and they're helicopter parents, but they're not. That's not true. Melissa, what do you think? Is this inadequate? Do you think this is the right metaphor for? We've gotten completely away from cancel culture, by the way, which we probably need to find our way back to that at some point. But maybe there's a segue here. So, what do you think, Melissa? Is this the right metaphor for this?
Oh yes. Because I've started Twitter. I use Twitter now. Which, just because of the election, after the election, I'm done with Twitter. But I see so many people. Joe Biden tweeted today about, mass transit systems are going to go unfunded because Washington can't pass a bill to fund bus systems.
They shouldn't.
And my question is, why is the federal government have anything to do with local mass transit? Well, because people need it. Okay, so if people need it, the city can provide it. The state can provide. Why is the federal government? Well, because people need it. Who else is going to do it? What do you mean?
A private company could provide it.
More efficiently and cheaper, probably too.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyone but the federal government.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And I think you're onto something, because Twitter is the location where all this cancel culture is happening, right? So you're right to be there, and God bless you for being there. I've been on Twitter for a very long time, and I actually have taken a step back because of the election. What I find on Twitter and social media is that people there's just no shame, right? They will just say whatever outrageous, crazy shit they think and put it right there on Twitter. And I keep thinking, like, don't you know people are able to read this? Like, don't you realize when you put that out there, other people are going to respond to this?
This is public.
Yeah. I mean, it's it's amazing to me. Maybe this is the Gen Xer in me, because we do tend to be a little bit more conservative with the way we put ourselves out there, right? And we're not quite as bold, we're not quite as disruptive as some people try to be, and we're certainly not instigators necessarily. Gen X tends to be sort of all right, I'm going to do my own thing, but I don't want anybody to pay attention to the fact that I'm doing my own thing, right? I'm going to go my own path, and if you want to follow, that's fine, but I will not lead. Like, that's not my jam, right? And
I'm sorry, I know this isn't related at all, but I would love a program, not government run, where a Gen X could adopt a millennial and like teach us your ways. I love that about Gen X, that y'all are like, why are people conflicting over there when I can go out on my boat? Like, that is the best thing ever. Love it.
Well, part of it, I think, though, is we grew up in an era of grunge rock, right? And Nirvana and Eddie Vedder and all. And the minute they got famous, they were all like, this sucks. I don't want to be famous anymore. Like, if you've ever seen Billy Corgan talking at what was it, Lollapalooza? And he's looking around, he's like, what the happened to Lollapalooza? He's like, the freaking baby boomers ruined Lollapalooza, right? And it's this fantastic interview on MTV where he's just like, sellouts. It's so amazing. There's a great
awesome
behind the scenes with one of the guys from Pearl Jam where he's like, wait, what is that? He's like in his basement. He goes, oh, that's a Grammy. And he's like dusting it off and like,
God, I had that.
I forgot I had that.
That is so legit.
This is not John Legend who goes on television with a wall full of EGOT, right? Like this is the guy literally from Pearl Jam going, oh yeah, that's a Grammy. Gum on it. Let me get the gum off it. And so I think part of that is just a cynicism, just like a natural, our generation just has this kind of cynicism around it. And what's frustrating me about Gen X right now, what I think maybe I would like to maybe partner with a millennial, is to figure out how to give a damn, because there's a lot of people in my generation that need to give a damn. They need to care, and they need to get involved, and they need to take action, and they need to lead, and they're not doing it. And if they don't do it, then we're literally giving another election to the baby boomers. 4 decades under the baby boomers, and we're literally giving another one to them. And behind them are the millennials. I mean, Pete Buttigieg was up there. He's a Democratic candidate, right? And if Gen Xers don't step forward and do something,
they're going to skip us.
They already have. They kind of already
you can
are.
see
right?
it in the SCLP. It's all baby boomers except for your beautiful selves, Melissa and Kasie, and then us millennials. And they don't get to pass the torch really to the next generation, because that would be too much work for the amount of Gen Xers that are in the party. Like, but it's crazy looking around churches and political parties. Where's Gen X?
Well, we're so small too. There's so few of us, and a lot of us are the first children. Like, so we're the baby boomers' first marriage, and then when they had their second marriage, that's where the millennials came from. And so there's not much of a gap between us and the millennials. And a lot of us, because we were such a small generation, our parents all got divorced in the 80s. We are really legitimately a quarter of the size of the baby boomers and the millennials.
Wow.
So
thank you.
So
I had no idea.
From a numbers
That's
perspective,
crazy.
there's that. That's not an excuse, but that's true. But so
you're still my favorite, so it's fine.
I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna love on that for a little bit. So let's go back though, because all of these things tie together. So we think about cancel culture and this the surge in people attacking one another, not being willing to accept free speech, right? And we're going to talk about free speech and whether or not free speech is speech with consequences, right? And so we have that going on. Then we have this idea of helicopter parenting and the helicopter government that wants to do everything for you, but really what they're doing is eroding your rights and not giving you the chance to do things for yourself. And then finally, we have the difference between the generations, where we've got one generation that's intent on maintaining power, on clinging to power, and that's who's running the Republicans and the Democrats. And then we have this other generation that is, I don't know what they want other than they want to be taken care of. I'm not entirely sure, right? And in the middle, we've got these Gen Xers who are just not stepping up to bat. And that's very frustrating for me. So let's kick it back to this cancel culture idea. Which generation is responsible for cancel culture? Who's doing it?
I think it's the millennials. I mean, really, I think it's this millennial. I think I don't really want to say entitlement because I've met some pretty entitled boomers myself. But I think it's the millennials, really. I mean, I think that's kind of where it started.
Is it fake activism? Do they think they're being activists when they're?
I think so. Yeah, because it's easy, right? Like you get online and it's really, really easy to be a keyboard warrior. Half the things these people do and say, they would never say in front of another human being face to face. I mean, it's so easy online. And it's the online generation. I mean, they came of age in this online revolution.
You got a lot of digital courage.
Yeah. I saw I'm going to say it was Micro. It wasn't Micro, but it was someone made the comment that, a lot of younger people have never said something to someone's face and gotten punched for it, and it shows.
Because Mike Tyson.
Was it Mike Tyson? I saw it and I went, that's true. They have never stood in front of someone, said something, and gotten punched for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree. And I don't know, I saw it attributed to Mike Tyson that people forget you could say this and get punched in the face for it, right?
Yeah.
Not enough people are getting punched in the face, I think. And it was attributed to Mike Tyson. I don't know if that's true or not. But yeah, I think the consequences are so low. And that may very well go back to that helicopter parenting, or that government is going to fix it. Government's going to save you. Government's going to help you, right? And so there isn't a risk there. There aren't any stakes there. And I think maybe that's the difference, right? Like maybe they think they can just be outrageous that way. How do you teach your kid that there are consequences for these kinds of things, aside from public shame, right? Because when we look at like Dangerous Liaisons and we watch Glenn Close pull her makeup off her face at the end of Dangerous Liaisons, right? Like there is such a thing as public shame and ruination, but public shame right now is like 15 minutes, right? It doesn't last. It's a brush fire, right? How do you teach your kids that there are consequences for being an asshole, to Jessica's point?
Well, I think that's where the truth comes in, right? Like, and truth isn't just telling your kid that they're being a jerk. It's punishing, or I hate that word, but disciplining appropriately, not over the top and not just a little bit for something that's huge, but it's using the appropriate amount of discipline for something in the home so that people actually know right from wrong. And I think that's something that our nation is struggling with as a whole. And I'd actually like to blame the government for that. Go figure, because the government is not our God. The laws are not the 10 Commandments. And I'm not even saying that you have to be a Christian, but the way that the laws are forced on us, and the way it feels like the government's always looking over our shoulder and things like that, it's like they're our conscience, and we've forgotten to do right and wrong without the government watching. And that's a huge issue. So that has to be taught at home. You have to teach values and integrity and clear definition of what's right and wrong at home, because when kids go out of the house and they're faced with the government or the internet, that's where they're going to start seeing more, and the lines are kind of blurred, but you don't want them to have blurred lines there. You want them to have strict right and wrong lines inside the house.
Yeah, Melissa, something to add?
That it triggered a memory. So there, Joe Jorgensen tweeted out a little video of a 3-year-old dancing with the sign at one of her rallies, and was like, oh, she's adorable, I'm going to buy her an ice cream or something like that. And I'm in a chat room with the mom of the girl in the video, and she was so excited. And a ton of replies to the tweet were, oh my God, I can't believe you brainwash your children. I wouldn't tell I let my children make their own decisions. I don't force them into anything. I'm going, and she was upset. She's like, what, you don't teach your children about what you believe? You just let them, they'll get their own morals from somewhere, I guess. I don't have to teach them how we think or what we believe. It was really weird, because all the responses were, I don't teach my children what to think or how to think. They just let them go, I guess. I don't know.
Wow.
Somebody actually commented on one of my Facebook posts. Actually, no, it was my husband posted a video on my timeline of this little girl crying because her dad called her a Democrat. And so she was like sobbing, and her mom was like, "What's wrong, honey?" And she's like, "Daddy called me a Democrat," and she's like losing it over this thing. And so this person commented on that video, and they were saying, you know, how sad that is that someone's indoctrinating their child. And my response is, well, parenting by nature is indoctrination, because you indoctrinate your children every time you teach them based on your, you know, belief code, your belief system. I mean, my children would be upset about being called a Democrat as much as they would be upset about being called a Republican. And it's not because we indoctrinate them. It's because when we see the things on the TV, when we see the election ads, when we see the commercials, when we see, you know, Donald Trump giving press conferences or Joe Biden giving speeches, we talk to our children about what does that mean? What they're saying, what does that mean? And how are they being truthful, and how are they being dishonest? Because let's face it, a lot of times they are dishonest. Yeah. So we talk about those things, and it's not that we're teaching our children one way or the other. We are actively trying to teach them how to work through the bullshit they're being given, what they're being told, you know. And so,
let me tell you something. Do not put up with any of that hypocritical crap from a baby boomer, because when I was growing up,
this was a millennial.
Every person who cut my dad off in traffic was a communist. Right? We would have been those kids that were sobbing if we'd been called communists, because we didn't know what communists were, but they were clearly bad because dad called the people who cut him off in traffic communists. Interestingly, now he's a big fan of Putin, and he thinks they're doing good things in Russia.
Oh, no.
QAnon, man. Look, and QAnon this week, they hijacked Tim Tebow this week. Like, I can't even, there's a whole segment of our country that has succumbed to what I can only call digital brainwashing. Like it is, and maybe this goes back again, it's the idea that government tells us they know what's best. Government gives us these truths, they call them truths, and we either believe them or we don't believe them. There's a master class, Neil deGrasse Tyson, there's a masterclass being advertised on YouTube right now. He's the physicist, right? The astrophysicist. And he talks about personal truth, political truth, and objective truth. And objective truth is really what we need to be getting to, right? And we probably need an entire episode on that. So we started out with cancel culture. We ended up with parenting government, right? The government tries to be our helicopter parents. And now I think we'll just wrap up here on this idea that people don't think anymore. That's what my t-shirt says. It says, think, it's not illegal yet. Sadly, we don't have enough of that happening right now. Next week, maybe we take on this idea that people are not looking for objective truth. They're defaulting to personal truth or to political truth. This has been episode 9 of Parenting Porcupines. Everybody say goodbye.